So our next speaker has dedicated much of her career to promoting diversity and inclusion in the public sector workforce. Sneha Chatterjee is a regional director for New South Wales and the ACT with the Department of Home Affairs. She's a qualified lawyer. She's a mentor in the Women in Law Enforcement Strategy Program, and she's also led the Multicultural Affairs and Social Cohesion Programs Branch at the Department of Home Affairs. I hand you over to Sneha.
Thanks. Thanks, Darren, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'd like to start off by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're meeting for those of you participating in Australia today. And for me, I join you from the city of Sydney, so pay my respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and further my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, as well as any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people here today. It's a hard act to follow the Sri Lankan seniors group, and I was fascinated by the video and was actually hoping that I too would get to join the group. I'm going to stay really still so that my virtual background doesn't distract you all, so hopefully that will get us through my presentation. The stories on forums like this are humbling but also inspiring, and forums like this give us an opportunity to pause and recognise the contributions of many Australians who've come to Australia through the humanitarian program, but also the community who support them. As our speakers have reminded us this morning, we all have our stories, our migrant stories, our stories of our families, and our own stories. My very first job in the public sector was working in refugee settlement many years ago, and to this day, it's one of the most rewarding roles I've had the opportunity to do. We know that humanitarian entrants enrich our community in many ways, by enhancing the prosperity through starting their businesses, sharing culture, and bringing new ideas. Many of you participating today, your friends and families, have gone on to build successful careers across many sectors and form a valued part of our multicultural society and Australian community. Events like this give me an opportunity to reflect on the role that Home Affairs plays in providing resettlement to refugees from around the world. Since the end of World War II, Australia has welcomed more than 900,000 refugees and others in need to our shores. The department provides humanitarian entrance and support in a number of ways, from permanent resettlement pathways to those who are most in need through the Humanitarian Settlement Program and the Settlement Engagement and Transition Sets Program, supporting services and organisations who help refugees and migrants integrate into Australian society, and other broader programs like fostering integration grants, facilitating a refugee's final step in their migration journey when they choose to become an Australian citizen. And indeed, Australian citizenship ceremonies are one of the greatest parts of my current role, presiding over them and celebrating new Australians. We've heard a bit today about the challenges presented by COVID-19, and for everyone in Australia, but particularly for those impacted by our humanitarian and migration programs due to COVID-19, it's been an unprecedented time. While it's unclear when we can see a return to normal operations, it's important that we continue to champion the hard work that continues to support those refugees who are on shore. The story of our humanitarian entrance does not finish at the end of the Humanitarian Settlement Program. Other programs continue this story. And so while at present we are unable to facilitate the entrance of new humanitarian entrants, we can share the stories and promote the invaluable contributions of refugees, humanitarian entrants, and the broader migrant population in Australia. So the first 5 years after refugee settlement, there's a range of programs and support, but it doesn't end there, like I said. And within the latest round of fostering integration grants, which some of you might be aware, the department approved activities that could accommodate the government's COVID-19 measures, support cultural communities, bolster resilience in times of crisis, and continue to actively participate in Australian society. For example, Green Connect Illawarra was awarded a grant to employ a part-time support worker to coordinate and supervise work experience for 25 refugee participants. This person will also deliver cultural awareness training to 120 staff and 5 labour hire employment partners. Green Connect specifically employs former refugees to do work that makes the planet and our local community better. It manages a farm in Warrawong, New South Wales, where they grow and distribute fair food, helps businesses, events and councils to reduce their waste to landfill, runs an op shop and offers labour hire to connect former refugee staff to other businesses, industries and opportunities. It provides training and support to enable each former refugee to use that employment experience as a springboard to suitable long-term fulfilling jobs and careers. Stories like Green Connect Illawarra are critical. We know that one of the additional challenges for humanitarian entrants is learning English, and that can be incredibly difficult depending on the pre-migration experience. Without English language skills, migrants and refugees are less likely to get a job, less likely to integrate, and less likely to participate in our democracy. The government recently announced welcomed and substantial changes to our Adult Migrant English Program, AMEP, lifting the cap on class hours so that all permanent residents and citizens can acquire the language skills they need to fully participate in our society. Time limits on enrolling, commencing and completing AMEP tuition will be removed. This is the most significant reform in many years. These changes mean that migrants will be able to access free English tuition for longer and until they reach a higher level of proficiency. The department recognises that it's more important than ever to harness the skills and experience of all Australians to contribute to economic recovery efforts and is committed to help migrants and refugees play their own part in the Australian story. Forums like this are so important. There's so much difficult news at the moment, but an opportunity to come together to share these amazing stories and to celebrate the achievements, to feel hopeful about the contributions of our youth ambassadors, to celebrate the community formed by the Sri Lankan Senior Citizens Group and many other projects around New South Wales are fantastic. I'd like to commend STARTS, David Arjung and the many volunteers involved in the Cultural Transition Project and other community groups and panellists we've heard from this morning for their participation, for coming together, and I encourage all of us to share these positive stories and encourage the greater sharing of migrants and refugees in Australia. Thanks very much for having me today, and sorry for the background that kept on flickering. Hopefully that didn't disrupt the entire presentation, but thanks again, and I look forward to, like you, sharing these stories as we go forward.